District Judge Eileen Cannon pauses several key deadlines in his classified document case. This is in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity. So here with reaction is former federal prosecutor and president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, Neama Rahmani. Neama, thanks for being with us this morning. How does the ruling over Trump's immunity affect, do you think, this classified document case?
Well, Trump keeps winning both inside and outside the courtroom. And even though the Supreme Court's decision in the classified documents case technically just applied to the D.C. election fraud case, of course, that same logic is going to apply to the other cases. And Judge Cannon issued a stay in the case and set a 2-week briefing schedule to consider whether that case should be dismissed entirely. And she also took 3 other deadlines off calendar related to some expert disclosures and disclosure of confidential documents and classified documents in the case. So this is something that she is going to seriously consider. And there's the very real possibility that Trump gets the case tossed entirely.
Yeah, just since you bring up the timeline, let's take a look at this, by the way, all the different cases with Donald Trump and where they stand, as each and every one of them seem to be, delayed, adding time to the calendar. A verdict's been reached, of course, in New York versus Trump. A verdict was reached in E. Jean Carroll's case. Postponed, the documents case that we're discussing. On hold, the election interference case, that's Jack Smith. Sentencing in the New York case has been pushed from July into September, and on hold is the Georgia state election case. So you can see all of these with Election Day looming there at the end of the timeline. All of these being pushed and approaching past that Election Day. So here's the question I would have for you, Neama. Coming out of the immunity case, it's all a question of what's an official act. You have immunity for an official act. Is there an argument? I don't know the test, by the way. What's the test for a court on whether or not something is an official act, so they can answer the question of whether or not how he handled classified documents is immune?
Well, that's the test. And Will, you nailed it. I mean, this is something that's really uncharted legal waters. But I would say that Trump has a better argument in the classified documents case than the election fraud case. And this is why. Historically, at least in the civil context, some judges have held that campaigning is personal and not official. Of course, Trump is going to argue that he was auditing the election, and his role as commander-in-chief is to make sure we have free and fair elections in this country. Now, as far as the classified documents go, I think Trump has a very good argument that his role as head of the executive branch is to classify or declassify documents. So I think Jack Smith is going to have an uphill battle. And the other important issue is this. He has a very favorable judge in South Florida with Judge Cannon. I don't think he has that type of judge in D.C. with Tanya Chutkan. So I think there's a good chance that Judge Cannon grants this motion and Trump walks away.
So just to making sure that I understand, in applying the Supreme Court's decision on immunity, we now divide acts into official acts versus personal acts. And applying it to these two cases, you think his handling of classified documents and taking them to Mar-a-Lago or saying that they are, classified or unclassified, easier argument to say, hey, that's an official act, so therefore I'm immune. And then whatever happens in the D.C. case, how he campaigned, what he had to say that day, we'll see, personal or official.
I think that's right, Will, both in terms of the substance and in terms of the audience. I think Judge Cannon has given Trump some very favorable rulings so far, and I expect that to continue. I think Judge Chutkan has been more skeptical. She, of course, denied immunity in the first instance. The D.C. court also denied immunity. Of course, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed. So just reading the tea leaves a little bit, I think Judge Cannon is the more favorable draw.
And this is all how the Supreme Court's immunity decision affects those two cases, not even getting yet to the merits of the case and whether or not Trump would win or the government would win in each of those cases. Neama Rahmani, thanks for getting up early with us this morning.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Will.
All right.